Juan Soto is back in the NL East after signing a massive deal with the New York Mets. What does this mean for the Atlanta Braves and the NL East? What does this mean for baseball? Is this good for MLB that only a handful of teams can sign these types of players? We'll discuss that and also get into all the other signings happening at the winter meetings. All that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast at LockedOn_Braves. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, stop what you're doing. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below. Let's continue the conversation there. A lot of great comments on yesterday's episode. I really appreciate that a ton. If you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Continue to tag me in those Spotify Wrapped. If I'm in your top 5 or wherever, I really do appreciate you sending those in. And I appreciate all the support that you give me here at Locked On Braves. Today's episode, we're going to get into the Juan Soto signing with the New York Mets. Just a massive deal. What is the impact on that for the NL East, for the Braves and the Mets? What is the impact on baseball? We'll get into some of the other signings on day one at the winter meetings. And will the Braves actually do something at these winter meetings? We'll discuss all that on today's episode. And you can get the season going with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, let's start with the biggest news of the day. I guess if you stayed up late enough, it was the biggest news of the night, with Juan Soto's agreeing to a deal with the Mets for 15 years, $765 million. I saw people joking online, I'll be over 50 when this deal is done and stuff like that. And it really started making me feel pretty old because I am in that boat as well. But what a massive deal for Juan Soto and the New York Mets. That's $51 million a year. It's just insane. No deferred money. So they're not pulling a Dodgers type of deal here. This is $765 million straight up. No deferred money. Now there is an opt-out after 5 seasons. So there's a chance Juan Soto could be a free agent again after 5 seasons. Well, he'll still be in his early 30s. Now, the Mets can void that opt-out by upping his AAV to $55 million a year over the last 10 years. So we're talking about potentially paying a guy $55 million a year who, look, at that point is probably going to be a DH, but still just incredible amount of money being given out by Steve Cohen and the New York Mets. And they got their guy. Nobody was going to outspend him. You know, you had the Yankees, the Blue Jays were willing to spend so much. I'm more to say on that in a minute. But just crazy, a crazy deal. That's a lot of money. And you could say whatever you want about, you know, I've had comments, people saying nobody is worth that much. It's ridiculous to pay a baseball player that much money. Look, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I love this sport. I'm going to watch it. It's a lot of money to pay somebody to entertain you, to help your team try to win a World Series, a championship. I understand that. Look, that is a lot of money to anybody. And to give out that much money to one single player, it seems absurd. But look, when you have an owner where money is no option and this is their hobby, this is what they want to do, then I think this is rare, is what I'm basically saying. But we've seen big contracts before. This is, again, 2 years in a row now. We saw it with Ohtani. And with that, we kind of made sense of it because Ohtani's a guy that is a unicorn. He does so many things for you. But Soto, when you break it down, and I don't want to take any shot or slight at Juan Soto, who's more than likely going to be a Hall of Fame player, he does 2 things really well. He hits for power. I guess 3 things. He gets on base. He's not good defensively, and he doesn't have much of any speed. But what he does do well, he does extremely well. Like I said, Hall of Fame level. But there's also the chance that in 3-4 years down the road, You are going to be paying a guy $50 million to be your DH. That, to me, maybe even more so than giving a guy, $750 million is crazy that you're going to pay somebody $50 million to be your DH. And again, I don't think that's happening right now, but I would guess the majority of this contract, Juan Soto is going to be a DH because he's not good defensively and he's just getting worse out there. Now, again, don't get it twisted. Don't take this as a slight against Juan Soto. He is really good at those two tools that he has, hitting for contact, hitting for power, as well as getting on base, which goes with that. He's had seasons of 5.5, 6.8, 6, and 8.1 F4. Those are for elite, borderline MVP types of seasons. And all of that in FanGraphs WAR is including a negative defensive value. So again, he's put up those good seasons in F4 despite having a negative rating defensively, but that also goes back to what I just discussed and the fact that you are getting a guy to be the best hitter on the planet. And he may be that. You could also make the case he wasn't the best player on his team last year and that he's not the best player in baseball, that Shohei Ohtani is, but yet he's getting over $50 million a year. Again, it's crazy. It's not my money. I think this is very few teams. I want to say this is very few teams that would be willing to do this, but you had reports of the Yankees offering over $700 million. You had reports of the Blue Jays offering $700 million, the Red Sox. So it's the market. And this is why when players get to free agency and bringing it all back to the Braves, it's why the Braves probably aren't going to sign a lot of big free agents, because once they hit free agency, especially if it gets into a bidding war, the Braves just aren't going to go past a certain amount. They certainly weren't going to go past $765 million. Again, could get up to $800 million. Just absolutely insane. Juan Soto, like he does in most parks, he rakes at Citi Field. In fact, it's one of the best parks that he's hit in. 35 games there. He has an 1175 OPS with 12 home runs. This is also might be cool for the Yankees-Mets rivalry. Of course, I hope the Mets aren't going to be good and don't get a chance to play the Yankees in the World Series, but that could make for a pretty good rivalry there during the season, during the regular season. Now, as Braves fans, what does this mean? What does this mean for the Braves in the division? The division just got a little bit tougher, no doubt, with Juan Soto coming in, but there's still work for the Mets to do on this roster. I mean, you compare the two rosters on paper right now, the Braves and the Mets. I'm still taking the Braves all day, and I think most people would say that. Take my bias out of it. I think you get an unbiased person to look at the two rosters on paper, and you're taking Strider, Sale, Lopez, Schwellenbach over Senga, Montas, Holmes, and David Peterson. You're taking Acuna, Michael Harris, Riley, Olsen, Ozuna, and Albies over Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Nimmo, Marte, and McNeil. Bullpens can be finicky year to year, but at least on paper, I'd still take the Braves bullpen, even after the loss of Joe Jimenez. So again, even I think if you ask somebody who is unbiased, most people would still take the Braves roster on paper over what the Mets have. But we know the Mets aren't done, and we know the Mets are going to continue to make some other moves to improve this roster. They have to, because Soto, it's not like Soto was just the missing piece, although the Mets had a good year last year. But again, they lost a lot from that roster, especially in the pitching staff, but also Pete Alonso, who was a big power bat for them. So there is still some work to be done, but Steve Cohen's not going to stop here. He's going to go out and make those moves. Now, quickly looking at what Juan Soto has done against the Braves. In 77 games against the Braves, Soto has slashed .325, .492, .626 with 19 home runs, 81 walks to 60 strikeouts, and an 1118 OPS. So he has absolutely hammered the Braves. So not happy about him being back in the division at all. That is just the sixth highest OPS against a team that he's faced more than 10 times. Again, his OPS against the Braves is 1118. That's just the sixth highest OPS that he has against a team that he's faced more than 10 times. Juan Soto is an amazing hitter. He is an amazing player. Don't get any of this wrong. He is an amazing player, and this is a big sign for the Mets. But one player does not a championship team make. We all know that from what happened last year. You had Soto and Judge together. You've had Ohtani and Trout together, and it doesn't guarantee you anything. And the Mets still have some work to do. Also, Juan Soto's OPS at Truist Park is 1127. So again, not happy that this guy's back in the NL East. He is certainly going to torture the Braves, but I think as you look at the two rosters today, the Braves still clear. But again, the Mets aren't done. Hopefully the Braves aren't done either because they haven't done anything. But should be interesting to see what else Steve Cohen and the Mets have up their sleeves this offseason. Now, the other question in this is, what does this mean for baseball? Is it good that only a handful of teams can sign this type of player? And is the sport really becoming pay to win? We just saw the Dodgers do it last year. They paid $1 billion to go out and win a World Series. Do you have to spend a lot of money to be able to win in today's game? We'll talk about that here next. Get into the action on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today. I told you moves are going to happen at these winter meetings, and you're going to see the odds change on FanDuel. Well, you have seen some odds change, and this is very, very interesting. So we've talked about it on here whenever I do this ad read. The Braves have had the third best odds to win the World Series next year. With the Juan Soto move, the Braves now have the second best odds to win the World Series next year. Why is that? Because the Yankees got bumped down by not getting Juan Soto, and now the Mets have the fourth best odds to win the World Series. So that's very, very interesting. And again, it'll be interesting to watch that throughout the offseason as more moves are made. And again, you get started at FanDuel, get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Never waste a hunch and make everyone want more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. You can check out your second listen at Locked On MLB, where Sully will certainly be getting caught up with everything happening with the Soto news, the fallout from that, and everything else happening around Major League Baseball this offseason. You can check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. And we'll be back every day this week, recapping what's happening at the winter meetings. You got the draft lottery on Tuesday. Braves won't be in that, fortunately, but we'll talk about that and anything else happening on Tuesday or Monday night. A lot of deals at winter meetings seem to happen at night for whatever reason. So hopefully we'll have a lot more news to talk about on Tuesday. Hopefully some of that involving the Atlanta Braves. Let's get back into this discussion, though, of the Soto deal and is baseball becoming pay for play? Do these low market teams just not have a chance anymore? I am one that has said for the longest time, it's baseball. You can spend money. It doesn't mean anything. Is that actually true? And is it good that only a handful of teams will ever be in on players like this? It seems like whenever a generational talent hits free agency, there may be 6 to 7 possible landing spots, and you eliminate over half the league immediately. You know, whether it's the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Giants, the Phillies, the Cubs. It just feels like there's a handful of teams that a player can really go to. 7 of the 10 largest contracts ever signed were signed by those teams that I just mentioned. The Padres also have had a couple of big signings in recent years, and the Rangers won. And you'll see teams like that pop up every now and then. The Nationals, when they were in their run, the Angels have had high payrolls before, but for the most part, those teams that I mentioned, they are going to always be the ones competing for the best players in free agency. But teams like the Rockies, Royals, Pirates, A's, Rays, Marlins, Tigers, Reds, Guardians, even the Braves, although that's from I think a business standpoint. I think the Braves can afford it. They just choose not to. But those other teams that I just mentioned, they'll never have a shot at signing a big-time free agent. I don't know what you do about it other than you make a salary cap, which is never going to happen. And like I said, I'm not necessarily in favor of a salary cap. I think there needs to be a salary floor. Look, if other teams can spend $400 million on a player, the Rays, the A's, the Marlins, they can find a way to spend $100 million a year on their team, not just on one player, but on their team. And I think there needs to be a salary floor. and those teams need to be spending more money. And while it's, again, certainly not the best time to point this out, the Dodgers just spent $1 billion to win a World Series. You can win it without spending a lot of money. It's just very, very rare. In fact, the Braves are the last team to win a World Series without a top 10 payroll, but they were 11th, so they weren't far off. In fact, the Astros won it in 2017 with the 17th highest payroll. The Royals won it in 2015 with the 13th highest payroll. Those are the only three teams over that stretch going back the past 10 years that have won the World Series and not had a top 10 payroll. And, you think about that and the fact that, you got a 70% chance of winning a World Series if you have a top 10 payroll. There's 11 teams that essentially don't have much of a chance, at least over the last 10 years, because they haven't had a top 10 payroll. Kansas City won a World Series in that stretch. So again, you can do it. Cleveland and Arizona reached the World Series. So you can do it. It's possible, but it takes great drafting. It takes great international signings. You have to hit on all these players at the same time. You have to develop these players and hope that they develop all at the same time. It just takes a lot more work. So it can be done, but certainly being able to go out and spend money when you need to, the way that it should work, what the Astros have done and the Cubs did to some degree when they won their World Series, is you draft and develop, you build up this core, and then you spend money to build around it. But some of these teams just don't have the capability to do that, or at least the willingness to do that. I don't know their books, but again, it feels like that's where the game is heading. And I'm not here to say one way or the other if it's good for the game or bad for the game. Certainly a lot of people are talking about baseball right now because Juan Soto just got the biggest deal ever for any athlete in any sport. So the baseball seems to be in a good place when you had 4 teams reportedly that were willing to pay one player over $700 million. Then I have to think the game is in a good place. But is it in a good place for all teams? Is it in a good place for the Rays, the Royals, the Guardians, the A's, the Marlins, the Pirates, the Reds, the Brewers, the Rockies, the Diamondbacks? Those are all teams that haven't had a top 10 payroll. The Twins as well, you throw in there, haven't had a top 10 payroll in the last 10 years. So it's very difficult, and it feels like it's becoming a pay to win type of sport where you have to be in the top 5 and the top 10 in payroll in order to compete and win a World Series. And not every team is either capable or willing to do that. Getting to some of the other news and notes from the winter meeting, some other signings. The Phillies signed Jordan Romano to a 1-year deal for $8.5 million. It seems like a nice signing, a safe bet for the Phillies, hoping that Romano can come back from injury and either be a setup guy or potentially a closer for them. Now, this one is interesting. I talked about the Blue Jays and how they were in on Soto, and according to Mark Fonsan, it was willing to go $700 million on him, but yet they wouldn't tender Jordan Romano a contract, and he goes out and gets more than what he was projected to get in arbitration. That doesn't make any sense to me. The Dodgers also out there still making moves. They signed my guy Blake Trinan to a 2-year, $22 million deal. Now, this one hurt. You've been listening to the podcast this offseason. You know how much I wanted the Braves to go out and get Blake Trinan, but I never thought the Dodgers would actually let him get away. It's not cheap either. Have to think about top setup men will get around $12 to $15 million now. You look at the Clay Holmes deal, and I know that was more for him to be a starter, but if he ends up being a setup guy, that's over $12 million a year. Now you're seeing Blake Trinan get similar money, so that kind of tells you what the cost is going to be for the Braves if they look to go out and get a top setup man. I don't think they're going to be in the play for a Tanner Scott or a Carlos Estevez, but that's what the price is, over $10 million for one of the top setup men on the market. Dodgers also signed Michael Conforto to a 1-year, $17 million deal. We mentioned that at the end of Sunday night's podcast. You're taking a gamble that Conforto can, 1, stay on the field, which he hasn't been able to do for a while, and 2, find his 2019 form, as that's the last time that he was more than a 2-WAR player. I do like some of the skill set for Conforto, which is why I wouldn't have been mad if the Braves had gone out and gotten him for 1 year, $8 to $12 million, something like that. But $17 million, obviously, pretty high price, but the Dodgers they're going for it. They're going to spend on whoever, and it's a 1-year deal. So and it's a chance for Conforto to go play for a winning club. But I think there certainly is a lot of risk in that. Some other smaller signings: the Cubs signed catcher Carson Kelly. So again, just another catcher you can kind of check off your list if the Braves were going to go out there, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And I'll go ahead and mention this now. Alex Anthopoulos talking about moves that the Braves could make, and he mentioned, starting pitching, relief pitching, outfield. Didn't mention shortstop, and didn't mention catcher. So again, unless something pops up, and that always can be the case, I think you should go ahead and prepare yourself for Orlando Arcia being your shortstop, and you should probably prepare yourself for Sean Murphy being your full-time catcher, which that one, doesn't upset me nearly as much. Neither one of them really upset me. I think Arcia can be fine if everybody else does their job. And then the other signing from the day, the Tigers signed Alex Cobb to a 1-year deal, so getting some depth at pitching there. That's, a solid move there just to give you some depth. I like Alex Cobb, but again, nothing really crazy there. Certainly nothing compared to what Juan Soto got, which was certainly the news of the day. Everybody talking about that, as they rightfully should. So let me know, what do you think? What do you think of the Soto signing? What do you think this means for the NL East? Are you worried about the Mets, at least right now? We know they're going to do more. Odds makers don't have the Mets passing the Braves with this move. I think somebody posted FanGraphs projected win total. They actually have the Braves projected to win the most games in 2025. And I believe, if I remember it correctly, it moved the Mets from 14th overall in wins to 4th. So it's a big jump, certainly. But what do you think about the Soto deal? What do you think about this for baseball? Do you think this is good for baseball, that only a handful of teams will ever realistically be able to sign these types of free agents? Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Next, we'll get into a little bit more news from the day on the Hall of Fame. A couple more players in there. And will the Braves make a move at the winter meetings? I'll tell you that here next. So we didn't really touch on this Sunday night, but Dick Allen and Dave Parker were both elected to the Hall of Fame via the Classic Era Committee. There's a little bit of background for some of you who aren't familiar with them. I was not really familiar with them at all, but Dick Allen played 15 years with 5 different teams, mostly in Philadelphia. /292, 378, 534, a 912 OPS, 351 home runs, 133 stolen bases, won the Rookie of the Year award, had MVP votes in 7 different seasons, including a winner in 1972 with the White Sox, and he was voted to 7 All-Star teams. That's the career of Dick Allen. And then Dave Parker, maybe one that some of you are more familiar with. He played 19 years with 6 different teams, but mostly in Pittsburgh. /290, 339, 471, and 810 OPS, 339 home runs, 154 stolen bases, got MVP votes in 9 different years, won it in 1978 with the Pirates, selected 7 All-Star games as well, but also won 3 Gold Glove Awards and 3 Silver Slugger Awards. And hopefully, I believe Del Murphy's going to be on this ballot next year, and hopefully he's able to again. Hopefully Andrew Jones gets in on the regular ballot this year. If not this year, then next year. So we could potentially have a couple of Braves going into the Hall of Fame in the next couple of seasons. You've been listening to me for a while. I'm kind of over the Hall of Fame at this point. It's become the Hall of Very Good. It's become the Hall of Let's put my best friends in. And then you don't put one of the greatest defensive center fielders of all time in there. It's just the steroid era really messed things up. But either way, great for those guys getting in. And like I said, hopefully the Braves will have a couple more players getting in here very, very soon. But let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. Docs Cards, Andrew Jones is going to make it this year. I can feel it. I can feel it coming. I hope that is the case. Like I said, if Ozzie Smith is in, why is Andrew Jones not in? Greatest defensive center fielder, I think many would say, of all time, if not right up there. He's got to be in the Hall of Fame just for that alone. All right, I asked some of you, will the Braves make any type of significant deal at the winter meetings? Just to kind of gauge where everybody's positivity or negativity is at the moment. There's a thorn in my side, says, I told y'all Grant Holmes is going to be in the rotation. I'm not sure what you think he's going to do that'll make a significant impact. You guys should listen and stop getting your hopes up. Look, I talked about this yesterday, A's comments about Grant Holmes and Daysbel Hernandez. do not read into that they're going to do nothing. They're going to do something. But I think what he said is still true. I think Grant Holmes will go into spring training and they'll stretch him out. Why wouldn't you? He showed some flashes at times last year. Why wouldn't you give him a chance as a starter? I think this should be the step where we see Daysbel Hernandez move up into the bullpen role and start getting a heavier workload in a setup type role. That's what you're hoping for Daysbel, who's now had a touch of the big leagues in parts of 2 seasons. So, what he said is true. It also doesn't mean that they won't go out and get something done. Caleb Koo's always very positive, says Nathan Eovaldi. That would be big, especially with some of these other free agent starting pitching prices. Is Eovaldi going to get $25 million a year? Are the Braves going to pay that? So again, be really interesting. That's one that I'm still got my eye on to see, because it's the one player we know that has been linked to the Braves by a trusted source in Mark Bowman of MLB. So we'll see what happens there with Eovaldi. Eddie Zipperer says there's going to be an outfielder. Eli White will not be starting on opening day. There's also going to be one new starting pitcher, and that's it. So Eddie's saying not necessarily during the winter meetings, but the Braves will go out and replace Eli White and get at least one new starting pitcher. I don't disagree with that. I could see them making, 2 moves of what some significance, with the rest being kind of minor moves or maybe some bench filler. I do think there are 2 significant moves to be made this offseason. One is an outfielder, one is a starting pitcher, and it would not surprise me if that's it, and that you just wait on the bullpen during the season. It would not surprise me at all if that's the case. It's easier to upgrade the bullpen during the season. Stephen Miller says, no, they won't. Dr. MJF says, I would doubt A does a free agent signing, but we need 2 starters and an outfielder at minimum. AAWX says, we won't in free agency. It will be through trade. Either Crochet or Kyle Tucker could be our big move. That would certainly be a big move for the Atlanta Braves to get either one of those guys. Agon says, I think they'll make a trade for a pitcher. Adding anyone of note would be nice and go a long way to quiet the haters. It does feel like the Braves just need to do something of significance to kind of settle things down. And look, that's not what it's about as a GM. You're not trying to settle a fan base down because the Mets just went out and spent $800 million, or the Dodgers continue to go out and spend a bunch of money. That's not what Alex is going to do. That's not what any good GM is going to do. But as a fan, sure would allow us all to take a little bit of a breath if he would just go out and do something of significance. And we'll see if that happens at the winter meetings. Couple more here. AJ Evans, at this rate, I would not be surprised if Adam Duvall gets re-signed. I would be shocked and a little upset if Adam Duvall is brought back again. I love Adam Duvall, the person. I've never thought too highly of him as the player. But either way, I think that is done. T Studio says, honestly, maybe a trade for a reliever or back-end starter, most likely not. As a fan, I wanted a big offseason. Don't we all? We all want a big offseason, but sometimes it's just not in the cards, and seems like it's not going to be in the cards. Dan Antler says, Jordan Montgomery and Geraldo Perdomo for Bryce Elder, Nacho Alvarez, and Orlando Arcia. Trying to think, I don't think the Diamondbacks do that deal. I know that possibly you're getting rid of some money there in Jordan Montgomery. You're freeing up a lot of money. I don't know. Bryce Elder, I guess, replaces him in the rotation. Nacho gives you a solid infield prospect, but they have plenty of infield prospects, and I don't know what Orlando Arcia does for them other than give them a veteran bench player. So I don't think the Diamondbacks do that move, but I think there is something to be done there with the Diamondbacks. All right, that will do it for this episode of a Locked On Braves. Thank you so much for joining me, Timothy Casey. Haven't seen you in here before. Thanks for joining. Mass Boost, a regular Live S as well. Jimmy, how long can the sport support this kind of contract? That's the question. It's the question a lot of people are answering. I don't know. We'll see in 5, 10, 15 years how all these deferrals work out for the Dodgers. What does it look like for the Mets in a couple of years? That's something that we'll just have to see down the road. Jeffrey Humphreys in here, Duck Disciple, Josh Daniels, Crazy Take, Bo and Gosman get traded to the Braves. I don't know where the Blue Jays are at. Like I said, they were willing to go big on Juan Soto. They have a very short window here with guys on expiring contracts like Bo Bichette, Vladdy. Gosman's deal, I think, is up in a year or two. They have several players that are going to be free agents soon. What are the Blue Jays going to do? I think they're very, very interesting. The Mad Monk, Docs Cards, Lex Rollins, thank you all for being here with me live tonight. Jimmy, BC, thank you all for being here. But that will do it this episode of Locked On Braves. We'll be back tomorrow night recapping day 2 of the winter meetings, and any deals happening there. Like I said, keep your eye out. It's a time of year that you really have to be on it. Latest here from Ken Rosenthal says sources Mets, Yankees among teams vying for White Sox Crochet. Maybe that trade will get done. And a lot of talk about Carlos Correa. I know Braves fans have been talking about it a little bit. We'll see if that happens. Maybe that materializes for the Braves or somebody else at the winter meeting. So again, it's a time of year you really got to be checking the social medias to see what is happening. But again, that'll do it here this episode of a Locked On Braves. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves. Subscribe, rate, and review to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.